Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Agentic AI is here. Get a seat on the bus or go under it. My name is Victor Anderson, and it is my pleasure to be moderating today's discussion sponsored by Smartstream. Now, it's fair to say that AI is here and it's here to stay. And if you think it isn't living up to its hype, you're probably doing it wrong. One has to look no further than social media to understand the transformative power of the technology. In that context, AI is mostly fun, even amusing. Although I'm sure you'll agree that it can sometimes be a little bit creepy and even downright sinister. Regardless, it is clear that we are now living in the AI era sparked by massive acceleration of the intelligence and the sophistication of the technology from around 2020 onwards. But what about the adoption and application of the technology across the financial services industry? We know that AI has moved swiftly from proofs of concept to live production environments within all manner of firms, underpinning systems that have the ability to learn, to reason, and to act, and by so doing, measurably impact workflows. Now, the technology is especially adept at enhancing firms' recs and exception management functions by reducing manual effort, accelerating resolution cycles, and improving data quality and all-round data output. Essentially, though, the capital markets paradigm has shifted from the early days where the position was this, where the firms could afford to use the technology, to now where firms have to ask themselves whether or not they can afford not to use the technology. Essentially, it's a binary proposition. You either embrace the technology and benefit from its astonishing versatility, or you don't and you get left behind. Hence the title of today's discussion. Now, I'd like to introduce today's panelists very briefly. Marlene de Hart from Southern Bancorp, David Power from State Street, Asen and Jadian from BMO Capital Markets, Michael McGovern from BBH or Brown Brothers Harriman, and Thomas Steinborn from Smartstream Technologies, today's sponsors. Please note that the views expressed in this webinar are those of the speakers only and do not reflect the official policies or the positions of the firms they represent. The end users in this webinar are not affiliated to and do not have a relationship with the sponsor. It's important to keep that in mind. And they do not therefore endorse its products and or its particular services. Now, before we kick off, I'd like my fellow panelists to introduce themselves and let the audience know a little bit about what they do within the respective organizations on a day-to-day basis with respect to today's topic of discussion. So in this order, Marlene first, then David, then Asen, and finally Michael and Thomas. If you would just let everybody know, or the audience know, a little bit about what you do within your organizations on a day-to-day basis. Marlene, welcome.
Thank you, Victor. Yes, Marlene de Hart. I'm Head of Information Security at Southern Bancorp, and in this role and relative to this discussion, I focus on the technical risks as well as regulatory compliance with this incredible use of AI. Thank you.
Good. David.
Hi there, my name is David Power. I've been a Chief Data Officer for a very long time. I have had a focus a lot on data governance, but also on regulatory programs, both in risk and finance and in other areas. And my focus on the regulatory area right now is on the AI governance component of it, and especially now for this call to highlight agentic AI.
Good. Asen? Okay, we just lost Asen for the time being. That's okay, we'll pick him up in a moment. Michael, welcome.
Yes, Michael McGovern here from Brown Brothers Harriman. My background is 30 plus years of security services IT, CIO of 2 custody banks. I joined Brown Brothers 14 years ago in that role. And these days, I tend to focus sort of in the intersection of business strategy and technology strategy, focusing on our clients' most, I would say, interesting, some might say challenging, issues related to technology, data, and obviously AI and machine learning and the other aspects of what our clients are doing to improve their get to the next frontier of their operating models.
Good. Okay, finally, Thomas, good to see you today. Do you want to let everybody know a little bit about what you do at Smartstream?
Sure thing. So Thomas Steinborn, I'm the Chief Product and Technology Officer for Smartstream. I am joined Smartstream about 9 months ago, but have been coming to Smartstream with about 15 years of data background, and with that background, AI clearly was a thing. Smartstream is mostly known for its reconciliations products, but not only. And clearly also today, AI, but also traditional machine learning and agentic is quite a priority that our customers are asking for, and then that I'm happy to bring to them.
Good, good, good. Right. As a point of departure for today's discussion, let's look at each of your perspectives and your understanding of the term agentic AI from your own perspective and obviously the position within your firm. So I'm going to, in the order, Marlene first, David, Asen, Michael, and Thomas, in that particular order. I want you all to come at this from your own kind of perspective. I think so that we can kind of create a mosaic view, so to get a kind of sense of exactly what entails agentic AI. And here's the really important part of the question: what specifically does it offer, and what are the crucial differences compared with reactive AI driven by LLMs, for example? Why is the industry so excited about the promise of agentic AI? Marlene, do you want to kick off this theme?
Sure, thank you. So, Victor, I think you said it. You can't be in any social media or even regular news channel these days without hearing about the implosion of AI and how people are using it. So, I think that's really been the game changer. And so, a good scenario, because as we go throughout this discussion, we might want to be mindful of some of the terms we're using. But when we talk about reactive AI versus agentic AI, a good example would be where maybe someone is using AI and they're looking to plan a trip or a simple dinner reservation. So in that case, reactive AI is operating more as a robust search, whereas agentic AI is going to make that reservation for you. And maybe if it's a trip or more complicated tasks, it's actually going to reason, give options, and actually take actions. So I think that's probably a simple example. And for this reason, I think it has people very excited about the potential.
David, do you want to give your take on agentic and why is everyone so excited, and how does it kind of move AI onto the next kind of level?
Sure. So when we look at the AI in the past, as was just mentioned by Marlene, it's something that you get information from. But when you look at agentic AI, you're looking at it to take actions autonomously. And we look at that in the context of reconciliations. There's a practical difference immediately. When you think about what we just spoke about, LLMs will tell you if there's a break. An agent, on the other hand, an agentic AI, will find the break. It will query the source system. It will cross-reference the counterparty information. It will apply the relevant rule set that's associated with it. And then within the defined governance controls, that means if we allow it, it can resolve the reconciliation break itself. So it's not just faster, it's a completely different operating model. And from a governance perspective, unlike automation, agentic AI generates complete structured record for every decision. So from my perspective, from a CDO perspective, the fact that every step in the reasoning chain is logged and interrogated, that is a huge and amazing governance asset.
Yeah. In fact, we're going to be talking a little bit about transparency and kind of governance a little bit later. But that you see as one of the really big kind of step changes that agentic AI offers capital markets firms?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Good. Okay. Michael, good to see you. Thanks for bearing with us. Do you want to, from BBH's perspective, why is the industry so excited about the prospect of agentic AI?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with some definitions as well, not to repeat what my colleagues have already eloquently conveyed. I mean, to me, the sort of, from a technologist lens, the agentic AI is obviously, well, perhaps not obviously, but it is definitely a game changer. I mean, the key difference between, or what defines agentic AI, I should say, is an AI system that has goals, that can create multi-step plans and act on them, and can do so with the possibility of autonomous action. We can come back to that because that's in regulated institutions like the ones that David and I work in, that's not where we're going to go anytime soon. Always a human in the loop. But having said that, these agents can react to changing circumstances. They can utilize tools. They can utilize APIs like the Model Context Protocol API that's become the standard to talk to each other, and that creates profound differences. Effectively, you're talking about an agent that can take initiative, that in a phrase becomes an independent doer rather than just a knowledgeable talker, which is how we might characterize the chatbots that sit in front of LLMs that we all interact with.
And the doer
Yeah.
also doesn't sleep. It doesn't need
Indeed.
to take bathroom breaks. Doesn't go on leave for a couple of weeks of the year. It's always there,
Doesn't
right?
sleep and operates at a very different speed
Yeah.
than the ones that us human beings operate at. So those they can accomplish a lot right away. And so back to your question about what does it mean for Brown Brothers? I mean, we've had a long history of integrating traditional machine learning with our own capabilities that we built around data classification and anomaly detection and all the things that we all have that we use for many, many different workflows at this point, including certainly reconciliations and exception management. But where we see, the opportunity that's in front of us with the agentic AI is really goes beyond automating tasks, goes beyond, the last few percent of breaks that we have in a given workflow, and really creates an opportunity to redesign work. It offers the opportunity for, transformation in operating models at a level at a level of process redesign and integration that really was not typically feasible or not justified in terms of the investment required. So we're very, very excited about that opportunity set in terms
Yeah.
of moving beyond task automation to completely redesigning work.
Thomas, sorry it's taken so long to get to you. I
No worries.
know my association with Smartstream goes back more than 2 decades now. And I know that Smartstream has been, as one of the third-party technology vendors, has been right at the forefront of the kind of the AI kind of move. And I'm very familiar with a lot of the technology that the existing AI technology. Do you want to talk a little bit about agentic AI, though? How is agentic AI from Smartstream's perspective? How is it different to kind of dumb AI, I suppose? And why is the industry so excited about the advent of agentic AI?
Sure thing. There are first a couple of things to echo that my predecessors already said, right? In my own words, really, where we stand today, agentic AI is very much goal-oriented and not activity-oriented, right? So in the past, you could pretty much ask an LLM, write me that email or summarize me that email, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you could do more things like this. But quite frankly, also Smartstream, pretty much like everybody in the industry, got a surprise, like in February this year, with the new models from Opus 4.6, Sonnet 4.6, or OpenAI's GPT coming out. It pretty much, yet again, redefined the industry, right? Thinking back to 21, when first GPT came out, and there was just yet another moment in the industry, also for Smartstream. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, here, what do I need to do differently for myself, for my company, but clearly also for our customers? So yes, kudos to a lot of my predecessors. Smartstream has been in the forefront of using AI, traditional AI, and in the early days of LLMs, all of this. But all of this, in a way, actually doesn't matter anymore, right? So because it's pretty much a change. So we're actively working right now, bringing reasonings and applying it everywhere in our customer base. Yes, reconciliation is the core of our business. And David, as you said, right, it will also redefine the way we thinking through reconciliations, investigations to solve this one. But it's so much broader I had conversations even last week with one of our customers, and person came back to us, yeah, reconciliation is great, but I really think I can redefine my entire processes in the company from the ground up. And that's the same way I think about our product and the opportunities we have with our customers. Can we put AI in the center of everything, as opposed to what has been true for the last 3 years, sort of attach it to the existing products, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is really where I see the change right now.
Yeah, really good way of looking at it, in fact. And a little bit, as I've mentioned a little bit earlier, if you're not getting the results, then it's not the AI problem, it's your problem, because you're not using the technology, in a smart enough kind of fashion, because it is literally quite staggering. The more you kind of work with the technology, the more you realize just how transformational it is, right?
Yeah. The biggest challenge for me, by the way, lies in change management for people.
Yeah.
And I'm just starting with self, right? So, okay.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that a little bit later, but yeah, absolutely right. Okay, we need to move on. So, David, I'm going to put the next question to you. You can lead off, and then Michael, Thomas, and then Marlene. David, let's talk about the tangible business and operational benefits firms can reasonably expect on the back of implementing agentic AI to help them manage for the purposes of today's call, to help manage recs and their exception management functions. What results and improvements can firms reasonably expect through the application of agentic AI to those functions that I just mentioned? Is there can you give us a sense of the step change of how transformational the technology is specifically to those business processes?
Sure. I'll give you two examples. One is, I think, a lesser known one or a less thought about one. The first obvious one from a reconciliation perspective is straight through processing, because doing reconciliations, people talk about straight through processing a lot. The more you can straight through process, the more you can make things more automated, the faster you can get the reconciliations done, your reports out, and it just simply works that way. Normally today, most firms are achieving about 70 to 80% STP for their reconciliations, but it's that remaining 20 to 30% that become the most difficult, and more resources get thrown at it to make sure that it gets done. And then you're going to have different types of breaks that are not consistently the same. There will be anomalies, but they may be related to the same thing. So when you apply your agentic AI to your reconciliations, it's then the learning involved in that is driving STP rates that can ultimately reach up to 95%. So that's a huge step change, with also, as you mentioned earlier, the AI agent looking at these breaks on an ongoing basis rather than in a batch processing model where users and people who know the data and know the business are on leave or are not around. You have a consistent record of what's there. And that's the second point, the consistent record, because pattern recognition at scale, there's a huge learning component of that, because every time a break happens, it's not that the person that is finding the break and fixing the break, they have a learning that they transfer to the rest of the organization in real time. But when you have an agent doing that, that knowledge is also retained. So it's not just if that break happens again, but if something similar happens or something from the original source of that break. So you can see the patterns, for example, where you see whether counterparties are consistently late or there's systematic timing issues that have caused breaks to occur. So I think that second component is underrated in terms of the benefit and is a huge one from my perspective.
Good. Okay, I've noticed that Asen is back. So Asen, good to see you. You're going to be joining us on the current theme, which is what are the tangible business and operational benefits firms can reasonably expect on the back of implementing agentic AI to help them manage their recs and exceptions functions across the enterprise. I'll come to you in a moment if you just want to kind of collect your thoughts. I'm going to go to Michael and then Thomas and finally Marlene, and then Asen, you can maybe sum up at the end of this particular theme. Michael, let's talk about what firms, what can BBH reasonably expect on the back of implementing agentic AI to manage its recs and exception management functions across the business, Michael? You're on mute, by the way.
Sorry about that. Trying to be
No
a good panelist and not
Yep.
get strange noises into the webinar. But I would echo, some of the things that David said. Certainly, I mean, I think his points are well made, and we see. I guess maybe we're in a slightly different place given the scope and the nature of our enterprise and the consistency of our technology platforms. We've been very fortunate to be able to enjoy very high STP rates across most of our core processes from our single global platform that we use for securities processing in every market. And so sort of, we have, in the mid, I'll call it using traditional rules-based engines like Thomas will be very familiar with, and for exception management and reconciliation and root cause identification, which I think David pointed out quite well there, classifying root causes and keeping track of exception conditions and feeding that learning back into the workflow for the next data set. But we've been able to accomplish a lot of that with traditional machine learning and then adding on AI on top of that. I think we all need to think about skating to where the puck is going to be. Since our Canadian friend has joined us, I'll throw in the hockey analogy. And where I think the forward-looking opportunity lies is to create the agentic workflows that will act, in a, I'll call it a coordinated fashion. So what's an example of that? One of the examples that we're looking at are corporate action notices, which folks aren't familiar. These are related to activities happening related to securities like stock splits, or often they're voluntary activities that require coordinating of information from multiple sources and comparisons. That's tend to be an area where we've seen, historically less automation and more human subject matter expertise being applied. Well, we see an opportunity to have an agent read a notice and communicate with another agent that's validating that against all the other notices and public information that's available. And then, another agent looking at drilling down into specific terms that tend to be problematic and comparing them back to the exception use cases, as David alluded to, the root cause information, and bringing that all together into a consolidated agentic workflow that then can progress to a point where it will be presented to a human expert for validation, because, unfortunately, we haven't, hallucinations are not gone, by the way. So, but the models are getting better. So that's those types of more complex use cases of coordination of activities that go beyond just a traditional reconciliation, and I'll talk about, multiple sources that aren't necessarily completely in sync from a temporal perspective or a data granularity perspective. So getting through those differences to get to a consolidated, reconciled view and we would say a golden corporate actions notice. That's to me, that's the opportunity that's in front of us with this, with the inference engine facilities of these agentic AI systems, and the ability to keep track of what they've done and what they need to do next.
Yeah. Thomas, from Smartstream's perspective, can you give us a kind of an example or a number of examples of what firms can practically expect on the back of implementing agentic AI to manage these back office functions?
Yeah, sure thing. And I'll expand a little bit on what Michael said, right? Because when I'm talking to my customers right now, very much the focus area at this point of time, and that is intentional, is on reconciliation break investigations, and all of this. But Michael already touched on it. We were starting within the realms of the current company, but quite frankly, the conversations rapidly involve also, can we reach out as part of the agentic process to the counterparties or the custodians that are sitting in between before we get in there, right? And it's all about, am I sending the email? Am I waiting for the email? Do I do this in a structured message? And quite frankly, that is a scenario that is rooted in the here and today and is reality. But if I'm looking more towards the vision of where I see Smartstream going, it's very much going towards agent-to-agent communication when we crossing company boundaries, and where also we will see micro payments going to happen as part of the negotiation, the agents talking to each other. And the industry is starting to move in that one. Do I see this being a reality in 2026 for Smartstream customers? Probably not, right? But these conversations are starting, etc. So we very much starting inside the existing banks, etc., and getting started. And the conversations there are really very much rooted in terms of operational benefits they can have. At the minimum, it's about time saved, really literally going from sometimes hours to seconds, because yes, many customers will still want the human in the loop, at least for the final approval step. But we also had conversations, and those are typically the customers that have already well-defined standard operating procedures that actually want to go all the way to autonomous for those where it is already well-defined, versus there's always the exception of this section, right? No matter what you do, rule-based matching, machine-based matching, 90% of the 90% you can match one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
But there might be the odd transaction out of North Korea, which you've never seen. Now what, right? So
yeah,
that will always require.
If it's North Korea, I assure you, U.S. institutions will not be processing it.
Yeah, exactly. So how
The
did
Treasury
it first
Department
get-
would be very upset with us if we did that.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't, right? But how did it got there? That's the investigation, right?
yeah.
So,
Good,
but
good,
anyway, we will have to have the humans in the loop, and we're trying to work through right now the balance between how far can the agent go without needing that sort of feedback loop, and solving everything ideally even all the way to the counterparty, versus where yes, we have to have the human in the loop. Right.
Okay, good. All right, Marlene, I'm going to pass over to you, and then Asen, I'll let you have the final word. Marlene, what can firms reasonably expect on the back of implementing agentic AI? Maybe if you are you happy to talk about the reconciliation and exception management, or I know that your key area of focus is slightly different to those back office processes, but do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure, yes. I want to mention that last summer, I spearheaded a community of practice on corporate use of AI. And so what we ended up with is about 34 participants across all of our lines of business. And we basically taught them how to use AI that we have approved and use their own business cases. So loan operations, compliance and risk, retail, so different lines of business. And we took them through the 6 weeks training, let them discover with their own use cases and efficiencies, and then they basically put a presentation together and took that forward to leadership. But what resulted out of that was building agents, finding efficiencies, but also more importantly, looking at how they're doing processes now. Are they measurable? And can you even compare the cost savings or the cost benefit analysis of using AI, or is it more just a distraction and overhead? And so I think we had really good discussions on that, and it's already been mentioned by David, Michael, and others. I think that there has to be a good basis, an underlining basis of data management and data governance before you lob on something that has a high level of complexity. So for that reason, I think there was a lot of learnings. And one thing that is also part of the conversation is, we're hearing all these numbers. I think David mentioned 70 to 80%. You can pick any routine process and maybe say, okay, there's 70 to 80% efficiencies. But stepping back and looking at sustainability, we have to add on different things like quality assurance, quality control, things to sustain what we're building next. And Michael also mentioned that, and I don't think any of us are ever proposing that we would just let something run in the background, but there's always this human in the loop that is playing those roles of oversight. And so, yes, 60 to 70% may be on the surface, but when you start adding in some different functions, you're still going to have real gains, but you have to include total cost of ownership in some of these other areas.
And that's something we're actually going to discuss a little bit later in our conversation. Right, Asen, sorry, we lost you a little bit earlier, but do you want to let people know just very briefly, literally in 20 seconds, what you do at BMO and your history with artificial intelligence?
For sure. I've been in artificial intelligence for the past 15 years in academia and industry. At BMO, I lead AI engineering for BMO Cap Markets, where we build all the agentic AI and Gen AI solutions for the rest of cap markets.
Okay, good.
BMO is Bank of Montreal, for those who don't know.
Good. Okay. Now, so what I want to do is just allow you to finish the discussion of that particular theme that we've just been talking about. What are the tangible business and operational benefits firm can reasonably expect on the back of implementing agentic AI to help manage their recs and exception management functions? What would you say to that, Asa?
Victor, if you don't mind, I was collecting my thoughts for the previous question.
Okay.
Maybe in a few seconds, just sum that up,
Okay.
because I really heard really great questions. Yes.
Okay,
sorry.
that's fine. Okay, we're going to move on. We've been going for a while, and we haven't got a huge amount of time. So what we're going to be talking about now are the checks and balances, or the guardrails. I know that everybody in the prep call for this session did mention guardrails and the checks and balances that firms need to implement in order to just ensure that that the technology works as it should, and that they don't expose themselves unnecessarily to operational and also especially reputational risks in the event that stuff goes wrong. So, Asen, I'm going to ask you to maybe kick this question off, and then we'll ask the other panelists to weigh in. So, to what extent can the results from AI be trusted, from agentic AI? And how can firms develop the necessary auditability and transparency? David, you mentioned this in your first comments, the auditability and transparency around the outputs and the results, or is this not necessarily a concern for the capital markets? What would you say, Asen, to that?
Oh, definitely a concern. That's a great question. I would say the biggest, if I want to sum everything into one word, the biggest hurdle of AI being utilized by cap markets is trust per se. And I would divide that into two categories, explicit and implicit. Trust in AI. In the explicit category, the challenges are non-determinism, output variance, hallucination, sensitivity of these functions, high sensitivity, and control. And on the implicit side, there's things that are, there are things that are not spoken that much, but there is that human side of job security attached to it. And the solutions to them, respectively, are for non-determinism. There are a lot that you can do. So these language models are inherently non-deterministic. This goes currently, as we speak, all the way to the compute level. So how GPUs and compute blocks take these numeric matrices. And for that, you can employ agentic flows, as was discussed earlier, to really include that reassurance. For output variance, you can use structured output. For hallucination, as was mentioned earlier, you can use verification, review agents, and citations to restore assurance. For control, you can use HIL, as was mentioned, human in the loop. Some sub-functions of them are interrupt functions with agents to go back to the user for sensitive, authoritative tasks. Feedback loop to improve the systems, observability, governance, and measurement. There are tools specifically designed for agent observability that have a full flow of traces, to look at and to improve.
Good. Okay, Thomas, I'm going to put the same question to you, and then in this order, David, Michael, and Marlene, if you wouldn't mind just following up. So David, let's talk a little bit about Thomas, let's talk about the checks and balances, the guardrails. Typically, is this something you speak to a lot of capital markets firms on both sides of the industry, buy side and sell side? Is this something that comes up in the conversations you have with them typically about, the checks and balances that need to be hard baked into the technology in order to immunize them from operational and reputational risks?
Yeah, sure thing, right? And I won't repeat what Ethan said, right? These are also the conversations we're going to have, right? What are the technical boundaries? What are the technical enforcement points? What are the checkpoints and tests and balances that you have put in? Where I typically start in these conversations is actually more sort of on the human side and the processes. The challenges that we actually see most is that the process is actually not understood at all within the company. And it's many, many times just in people's heads. So the challenge is much more putting these approval rules into tech. If it's worst case just in people's head, and we have had those conversations, then this is a challenge. So the first step actually needs to be about documenting and putting down the standard operating procedures, including sort of at least for where it needs to be deterministic, the steps, the rules, the 4 I's, the 6 I's, approval boundaries, risk exposures, etc. And that, unfortunately, many times isn't even available unless we also use tech to observe what is actually going on. And that's why we're seeing that many companies are not ready to even move to agentic, because even if we put the technology in the hand, we wouldn't know how to onboard the customers, configure it, and put it in. There are a few that are ahead and that are advanced and bring it in. So the first order for me is always ask the customer, know your processes, right? And once you overcame that steps, then we're coming back to what Ethan said. It's more the technical side of it. How do we combine the reasoning side, the sort of probabilistic natures of agents with also deterministic technology? And it could be still rules, machine learning, etc., that should be used, as well as classic good old math that calculates me my risk profile, right? So my point here is let's bring both sides together, but start at the process side and the people side before you even go to tech.
Good. Okay, David, we're going to pass over to you now. You mentioned transparency, you mentioned auditability in the past. Do you want to talk a little bit about the checks and balances that need to be in place from a chief data officer's perspective?
Sure, Victor. Look, as Thomas and Asen really hit the nail on the head in some of the things that they said, and I completely agree with them. As a chief data officer with a focus on AI governance, I believe the question is not whether whether you can trust the output. I believe it's the question is whether you have built a system where trust can be warranted. We must ensure that when we build governance and build AI systems, that by design, these things are built into it, not as features to be retrofitted later. And this includes things like, as I mentioned, accountability, logging, lineage, transparency, explainability, escalation, auditability, privacy, security, and a human in the loop. And I list them all very quickly because there are a lot of things to consider, and therefore you need to have some kind of a structure and process to ensure each one of these components are included. Explainability, auditability, and trust are not nice to have anymore. If you look at the EU AI Act, it is a legal requirement. If you look at SR 11.7, it has been a regulatory expectation for years. Therefore, governance by design is much more preferred than governance by crisis. I think that firms will either build guardrails in from day one, or will have to build them after their first regulatory examination, unfortunately.
Michael, over to you. Let's talk a little bit about BBH's guardrails that it is hard baking into the AI technology it is deploying, developing, and considering to deploy at some point in the future. Do you want to take a stab at that? And then Marlene can have the final word on this theme.
Yeah, I'll be brief because I think David and Thomas's points have been very well said and covered, the vast majority of the way we're thinking about it. In a phrase, I would say it's responsible AI by design, to pick up on David's comments. And we have a sort of somewhat apocryphal saying we use in the firm: measure twice, cut once. So we apply that to everything we do, and we need to apply it to how we approach governance with respect to AI. And David rattled off all the key in terms of explainability, auditability. The benefit of agentic being, that with a sort of layer on top of the probabilistic, neural networks that that drive the underlying LLMs that are being utilized, as Ehan eloquently described. Those challenges at the deployment level and capability level. So it's really on top of that. We think where we're focusing on now is having put in place explainability, auditability, and the tracking and governance processes that are consistent with our policies and procedures as a regulated financial institution. It's now about KPIs. How do we measure? How do we measure accuracy? How do we measure improvement? How do we apply the same sorts of measures that we do to everything else we do in terms of our operating models, things like straight-through processing that was mentioned earlier, our client status tracking that we do of satisfaction and accuracy. And so that's really where our focus is now, on thinking about what would the scorecard look like? What would the balanced scorecard look like? What KPIs and what measurements can we apply? Concepts and capability and measurement capabilities can we apply directly from our other technologies, and what have to be uniquely designed to be develop that back to trust. I think in a word, I think Ehan hit it. So that's where we're focused these days. For us, it's always going to be about augmenting what our employees do, what the human beings in the loop are doing. It's not about replacing everything they do. It's about augmenting. We call it collective intelligence at BBH.
Yeah. Good. Okay, Marlene, final word for you on this theme. You mentioned the guardrails a little bit earlier, checks and balances, etc. Do you want to talk a little bit about those that need to be in place before firms can reasonably roll out agentic AI across the business?
Yes, and I will make it brief as well because I'm going to leverage everything that was said before, but something slightly different perspective is getting ahead of our regulators. So even if we are ready to use this internally and we feel like we have the good foundations and some of the controls in place, there is a deliberate approach in order to make the regulators comfortable with what we're doing. And a lot of this has been mentioned. I love what David said earlier about Agentic AI giving us complete change management output, and some other things that have been mentioned about good data governance already. But I think having internal policies in place around the use of AI, as well as those procedures, and then the demonstration of the controls. One area that I'm seeing that is getting challenged is model risk. So if you're using AI in particular with fraud, everyone's excited about using AI for fraud, but the regulators are going to want to look at the model risk and use of that. So I think just being mindful that we have to bring the regulators along with this journey.
Good. Okay, we need to move on. We're going to be talking now about the typical challenges and the hurdles that firms need to address, including internal pushback. And Thomas, this is what you mentioned a little bit earlier, when looking to deploy agentic AI. What are the organizational and technical foundations and considerations that need to be in place to avoid common pitfalls associated with the technology? And what are those common pitfalls, if we can kind of discuss those as well? So, and what I want to do is I'm going to ask Michael to kick this off, because I know that, Michael, you can't be with us for that much longer. So if you want to take a stab at that and talk a little bit about, from an organizational perspective, what are the bits that need to be in place before you can reasonably deploy a fit for purpose AI strategy across the business? Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've hit on a number of these sort of nuances as we've had the discussion already. But what I'd focus on from an organizational perspective is a couple of things. One is we have had a business-wide business transformation set of capabilities and organizational construct in place really for the last 7 years. And so our AI journey started with bringing together subject matter experts and process experts and technologists who could build out the sort of foundational capabilities that we could use to deploy. Initially, it was traditional machine learning, building out our data classification engine, our anomaly detection engine, and these have become our engine for processing unstructured data. And the data challenges are, I think, some of the more interesting areas that we haven't really focused on yet in this discussion. But it has those sort of foundational elements, having the organizational construct that was horizontal, right? So not regionalized, not country specific, not business area specific. So it meant that the tools and the skill sets that we deployed in that center of excellence could be deployed across the entire enterprise. And so we tried to avoid this sort of 1,000 flowers blooming in different departments, which on the one hand you want to encourage the creativity and the energy of all those committed experts in your staff. On the other hand, we want to make sure that the capabilities that we develop are industrial strength, are governed and managed in the right way, and can be applied on processes across the enterprise, not just at a departmental or a single subsidiary level. And I think that commitment, and was hard to get those foundational things in place and keep them in place. We all know budgets work. We all know how they work. But that commitment and that investment has probably more than anything else positioned us well to take advantage of what is really a rapidly increasing. I mean, ChatGPT was November of 23. So we're operating at light speed now in terms of new capabilities coming into the frame. And I would put that as my number one recommendation for your listeners and those viewing this is focus on that organizational model. And then to the extent that you can, it's all about the process, right? We're automating processes here. So the whole process reengineering sort of mindset, current state, desired future state, getting people towards a process orientation. And then there's, I'll just throw it out there. I won't cover it, but making your data AI ready is, I think, the next frontier.
Yeah. Good points all. Marlene, I'm going to pass over to you, and then Thomas, David, and Asen in that order. Marlene, how do organizations prepare fully so that the AI technology they're implementing can have the optimal effect on the overall business processes it is looking to enhance? Marlene?
So Michael used a term that I love, which is the horizontal organization. And some have even called this the frontier firms. So we've heard of frontier LLMs, the frontier firms who are aligning their organization around these goals. So Agentic AI, we've already mentioned that it's very goal-oriented, but also aligning the organization. So in our community of practice I mentioned earlier, where we involved the lines of business, what resulted out of that is exactly what Michael touched on. What are the things that we can take as the practice, the operational practices that's really scale across all of these lines of business, trying to achieve these goals with the use of AI? And that's where you start getting the sustainment and scale. But I do think that organizations who are embracing these hybrid teams or horizontal structures and solving problems not at the department level, but at the organizational level are the ones who are kind of building this maturity model that's needed.
Good. Okay, Thomas, over to you, and then David and Asen. You obviously advise a lot of capital markets firms. What do they need? What are the building blocks they need to have in place in order to make full use of the technology, of the AI technology they're looking to implement?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? I mean, there are still many things that we always need to do: information security, data security, and already was talked about like data quality, etc., to do proper reasoning, etc. And those are things that always have to be in place the last 15 years and will continue to be in place. But where I see really the current primary challenge is understanding and actually redefining the processes. Yeah, I also like the process horizontal organization. But what I'm about is to what I said at the beginning. I believe with AI today, we need to reimagine our products, our processes being at the center of the user experience. And even if the goal of agents is to automate workflows, which is true, if we just automate the workflows as we know it today, we achieved something, yes, but we're only moving faster. We are not really sort of having transformed the organization. Thanks, Mike. And that's where we actually need to go. So now reimagining processes clearly is a problem because you need to have a full understanding of your entire company and how the things are connecting together. So where we're starting typically is first and foremost, understand your processes, bring it in. And then the next level conversation goes to how are you changing the processes? Because remember, most of the time processes were in place because we needed more people. The answer that agents are providing is we're needing less people. So that implies we need to change the processes.
Yeah.
Most people don't think about it that way.
David, over to you. Do you want to talk a little bit about the bits that need to be in place? And also, and a kind of an auxiliary question as well is, there've been huge kind of sweeping generalizations and predictions that AI is going to replace all these back office jobs or huge numbers of jobs. Have we actually seen that kind of anecdotally across the industry? I've got my view, but I want to hear the view of the professionals. Are we seeing large numbers of people being replaced by machines, David?
Sure, I'll start with that one and then talk about the challenges and the hurdles. So in terms of has agentic AI taken over already and a large number of people losing their jobs because of it, my view is no. If you look at financial institutions, they're by and large conservative organizations, and they take careful steps to make sure that when they're implementing something, they need to get it right. We could list all of the regulations, and there are a lot of them, not just on the AI component of this, but we've been talking about reconciliations. There have been reconciliations enforced because of many types of regulations, and they're also being looked at very carefully. It will take a bit more time for that to happen, and I'll talk about the hurdles why that's happening. But just in terms of anecdotally, I was at a conference about 2 days ago, in fact, where we talked about the use of agentic AI in Switzerland and in Swiss banks. And what we heard was the most agents that are in place today, one bank had 11 agents in place, but the time to take the agent to learn is going to take some time, because when you put somebody in charge, somebody being an agent in charge of a reconciliation, you don't leave them autonomous on their first day. You need to take care of it. You need to check their output. So it's step by step that it's going to be built out. And that comes to the challenges and the hurdles and the common pitfalls. People can't think that you put an agent in place and tomorrow then suddenly the process has been taken care of. You need to take care of the agent. You need to ensure that it's doing the job correctly. You need to check the output. And slowly but surely you can give it then more information. But one of the bigger hurdles are the things that we've been talking about for a very long time, and it hasn't changed. And it was mentioned by a few of the people already on the call. You need to get the underlying processes right. You need to get the underlying data right. You need to get some of the underlying infrastructure right, which is very, very old in some instances. So you can't suddenly put a layer of AI on top of some very old infrastructure that's run on a batch processing model. You need to really have a hard look on that underlying infrastructure. Your underlying data to make your data AI ready before the agents can then become effective.
So if you're automating bad processes, all you're doing is you're just going to do it faster, but they're still going to be bad processes, right? Or bad.
Yeah, so and we talked about it at a meeting that we had, actually a round table the other day, when you were speaking about managed processes moving to the cloud, and we talked about lift and shift. And if you're going to lift and shift something, then again, as was mentioned just a moment ago, you may get things done a bit more quickly, but you're not really changing the operating model.
Yeah. Good. Asen, I'm going to ask you a little bit about BMO. Firstly, are you seeing, and maybe you can't comment on BMO, let's talk about anecdotally across the industry. Are you seeing large numbers of jobs being replaced by machines? That's the first part. And the second part is, what are the building blocks, the processes that need to be in place in order for agentic AI to be optimized and deliver maximum value to the business?
Great question. So I have to agree with my fellow peers. I have not seen an exodus of positions that exist in our cap markets, and obviously the rest of BMO as well. And it kind of relates to some of the previous conversations that we were having, and kind of the trust in AI and what it's going to impact us with. And what it's going to impact us with is the job evolution and not a mission. That's what I've been observing. And it has really shifted, the utility of AI has shifted our, the bottleneck from getting to know, as a very concrete example, getting to know our sell side or buy side customers, to now we know them. Conversations are way more precise. Products are way more precise. I need to be able to make more calls, for instance, right?
Yeah.
So it just shifted that entire workload to a different perspective. So we have problems that we didn't have, and now we need to think of that we can solve. So that's one way. Did I forget the second part of your question?
Yeah, the second part of the question is, what are the bits that need to be in place within an organization for it to be in a position where it can maximize the efficiency and the value of the AI technology it's implementing?
Brilliant. So there are multiple dimensions for that. Let me focus on the data dimension, since we did talk about it, but I want to go a little bit in more detail with an example. So on the data side and the processing side, what does it mean for it to be properly set up when it comes to agents? We noticed some things that could have actually helped humans too when we wanted to implement agents, because we don't have a choice there. One example is for the data model and the metadata for all these structured data tables, for instance. We noticed that the definitions are variable. Yes, humans can understand that. A lot of these metadata may not even exist to a full extent. We absolutely need that. So one of the technologies that kind of sits in between agents and the data is called this MCP, Model Context Protocol, which has been a big topic since last year when Anthropic came up with it. And in order for MCPs to work properly, for agents to know what data to query, how to query the right data, those descriptions need to be written properly. So we had to go back to our SMEs and have them, in a very thorough and methodical approach, write all the descriptions so that they're accessible by the agent. Let me leave it at that. Yes.
Okay, really, really interesting. And I think that ties in really neatly with David's comments about the quality of the data, kind of underpinning the technology and kind of imbuing the technology with life, I suppose. If it's poor quality, you're going to get really poor outputs at the other end, right? Okay, we've been going for the best part of an hour. We need to finish fairly soon, but what I want to do is just address one more issue, and that is going to be the build or buy issue. We can't not talk about it because it is prevalent in all firms right now, whether they're going to develop their own AI technology in-house, or whether they're going to do it, hand that over to an external third-party provider, or do it in a kind of a hybrid fashion where there's a kind of a partnership between a third party and the internal resources. So, Thomas, I'm going to ask you to kick this question off, because obviously, Smartstream is a third-party technology provider. I want to hear your take on it. Typically, when you go and speak to buy-side and sell-side firms, what is their feeling about, what is their stance with respect to using internal, external resources, and also where do they kind of draw the line as to what they are happy to source externally from a third-party provider like Smartstream, and what do they want to kind of retain in-house? And then I think, Marlene, if you wouldn't mind following up, and then David, and finally, Asan, you can have the final word today. Thomas?
We're seeing actually quite a spectrum on that question in terms of where each of the customers are, right? So the answer actually lies in their current maturity and how much they actually have thought about the agents or the agentic world, or broadly speaking, sometimes just about AI. So in my customer conversations, we have some that are further down the road, actually have built their first agent and or even put one in production, right?
Yeah.
But right now, this is roughly in the single digits, maybe soon reaching 10%. And most of these companies have built because they had no choice, right? There was just no vendor. Then the other group I would say that I'm speaking to at this point of time are sitting somewhere that just realized that they need to do something, and they have a mandate from the board, and for them it's time to market. So from them, they're more than happy to take from Smartstream or others, but they prefer then just simply to assemble. And then we have others that have it there, but going much more deliberate about it and doing the combination between sometimes bringing best of breed, Smartstream or otherwise, and clearly also building a lot of things in-house as well. Generally speaking, it's also a dimension of company side and in-house skills, because agentic is very new for many of us, but clearly also within the banks, right? This requires a complete technical different skill set, and not every vendor has it.
Okay. Good. Marlene, Southern Bancorp, are you guys a build or a buy shop? And where do you draw the line between partnering or just going it alone and hoping that your techies can develop the functionality that the business needs?
Right. So I think the hybrid model is really what's going to work for most firms, for most organizations. And part of that is just the acceleration. I agree with what Thomas said. If you were well resourced, and I've worked at organizations in financial services, well resourced early adopters of AI, but at this point, it's looking at the cost benefit analysis of what the providers can give you. Many of these providers are also specializing. So the larger service providers are specializing around the business verticals and are in a position to already address some of those safe and sound practices. Hybrid is probably what I see as moving forward.
Good. David, your perspective, and also, typically if you were to partner, obviously kind of a theoretical scenario, if you were to partner with an external provider, typically what are the bits that you would look to have them develop for you and deliver for you, rather than you going and spending 18 months or 2 years or however long it's going to take to actually develop that technology?
Yes, Victor, I completely agree with what Marlene said around the hybrid model. And I think you need to be selective on what you do build and what you do buy. I think it's a very important point to think about competitive advantage, and there's not really much competitive advantage on building your own foundational infrastructure. You do, of course, need to get some balance to make sure that you retain some institutional knowledge, but I would be looking at a buy option when it comes to the foundational model. I would be looking at some specialist firms that do specialist things. There is no point in somebody in a bank, I believe, building reconciliation, for example, from scratch, when there is no competitive advantage in having your own type of reconciliation model, when there are specialist reconciliation models, for example, on the market. So that would be a buy from my perspective. But then when it comes to the governance wrapper, for example, which is very important to me, it is very important under the EU AI Act, SR 11.7 as well, to ensure that you have governance responsibility. So understanding exactly what's going on inside that governance model and having that institutional knowledge is very, very important. So for me, again, the hybrid model is the right way to go.
Asen, final words from you today. Do you want to talk a little bit about BMO's perspective? Are you guys a build or a buy shop? Does it depend on the type of technology and the type of vertical? Marlene mentioned the kind of the business verticals that are being supported. Where do you draw the line, Asen?
So we're definitely a hybrid model as well. Maybe I can go a little bit deeper into what build or buy means for us. So when the technology is mature, it's almost certainly a mistake to go and try to build it. Usually, and as mentioned correctly by all my esteemed peers, there is no competitive advantage either, because everybody's moving. Actually, it would slow you down significantly if you want to build from scratch. When is a good time to build? I would by default I would say buy. Obviously, safety, security, and reputational risk, all those governance in place, assuming. Unless the capability you're looking into does not exist and is not mature, is not stable, is not trustworthy, and that's where you can implement your competitive advantage. And for those, you would also require to have some of the most advanced skill sets and utilize them in the best way. You don't want to bring in an expensive team to build you things that exist outside defeats the purpose. And I hope that answers.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Now, that brings down the curtain on today's discussion. We've been going for well over an hour now, so we need to leave it there. That just leaves me to thank my fellow panelists today, Marlene de Hart from Southern Bancorp, David Power, State Street, Asen Jadian. Finally, it was good to see you, Asen from BMO Capital Markets. Michael McGovern had to drop off. He's got a client call from, he was representing BBS today, Brown Brothers Harriman. And finally, Thomas Steinborn from Smartstream Technologies. Thank you all very much for your time today. Thank you for your expertise and in helping get today's session together, and for helping with the all our discussion points. I look forward to catching up with all of you in the not too distant future, and thank you again very much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.